This is the perfect time of year for me to be doing this because it's the beginning of a new year and everybody's maybe thinking about getting healthy. And it all lies within yourselves to get healthy. I'd like to start just by reading a couple of paragraphs and then talk a little bit about the book and a little about gluten and maybe who would benefit from reading the book, and I might tell you a couple of little short stories here or there, and then we can have some questions. And I don't live by a watch, so if it gets to be about a half hour, if somebody would let me know, that would be great. Okay, this is chapter 1, Crazed. When the health of one's children and grandchildren is severely negatively impacted and the doctors don't think anything is wrong or can't find the answers or treat the symptoms with heavy pharmaceuticals that don't address the cause, then one can become a bit crazed. I don't mean crazed as in mentally unstable. I mean crazed as passionately driven to learn as much as possible about the origin of the numerous and insidious maladies affecting not just members of my family, but a huge number of families around the world. I also mean crazed as in determined to get the word out to the many folks who are finding no resolution to their ailments despite having had every test there is, except the right ones. And this next little bit is chapter 2. Angry Graham, a family saga. You bet I was angry. It was more like a stifled inner rage the first year or two after Nick's diagnosis. My husband and I had felt for a while that something was going on with our grandson. Things just hadn't seemed right. Honey, check with his doctor to make sure there's nothing serious developing, I would suggest to my second daughter, Danielle, who is here tonight. And he's fine, nothing is wrong, was the doctor's response. At age 2, Nick was a pudgy-cheeked, thriving child who was alert and content. As he became an active toddler, he began to slim down, as expected, but then the slimming continued. By age 5, he was pale, rib-thin, and had little muscle tone. He became easily agitated, and his muscles and bones ached. He couldn't eat much at the dinner table, but he was hungry all the time. His feet were ultra-sensitive to the stitching in the toes of his socks. He was always tired. When spending the night with my husband and me, he needed help getting into his pajamas and walking up the stairs, if you can imagine, for a 5-year-old. Eventually, he began to have intestinal issues, and his lips were dry and cracked. On frequent visits to the doctors, he was given a prescription for whatever ailed him. Sore throat, cough, earache, the usual antibiotics for the usual childhood maladies. So I would like to stop there and just address the usual childhood maladies for a second, because our bodies are intended to be healthy. And if they are compromised by a malabsorption issue, which gluten causes, you're not absorbing your vitamins and minerals, and your body can go awry in many, many different ways. So, since doing this diet, Nicholas, my other grandchildren, my daughters, my husband, and myself, we are fantastically healthy people. And those childhood maladies don't present themselves in our family, at least not very often. You know, you might pick up some viral thing or something, but usually you can fight it off pretty well. So, I had a pretty good reason to write this book. My grandson having had 10 to 12 symptoms that I had read about, and I wondered why his doctor didn't have a clue about any of this. And we found out through a cousin of mine whose wife has celiac disease. And she finally, after the third family got together, said, Anne, you know, maybe it's celiac, and there's a test for this. So we requested the test, and lo and behold, he was positive. Within doing this diet, within, I'd say, a day and a half, I know he felt better. And in a week and a half, or 2 weeks, he had color in his cheeks. And 2 or 3 months later, his muscles were developing. Parents and grandparents, you need to keep an eye on your kids. And I talk more about the symptoms in the book. You know, one chronic symptom that does not go away could be enough for you to say, gee, I wonder if it's this. So, what's celiac disease? It's an autoimmune condition where you are sensitive to the anti-gliadin, you're sensitive to gliadin, and it creates antibodies. And those antibodies, gliadin is a little part of the gluten. And those antibodies attack your small intestine. So you have villi that look like this, and they're very healthy right now, with lots of up and down room between each finger to absorb all the vitamins from all the good food hopefully everybody's eating. And if you're sensitive to gluten, this is what happens to them. They get worn down and flattened. So you no longer have that ability to be absorbing all of your nutrients to keep you fantastically healthy. And because of that, this thing can affect any part of your body. It's incredible. And you will not believe the information in my book. And I didn't research everything, but darn close to it. It's pretty fascinating info. And when you get the gluten out, life can turn around. And you know, one thing I wanted to do at the beginning was ask, how many of you are already doing a gluten-free diet? So it's about half the audience. Okay. So this is probably the most insidious thing I have ever read about, and I've been reading about this for, it'll be 10 years at the end of February that we discovered this in the family. And when I did discover it, I wanted to know who else in the family had this, because my reading told me that there was a genetic predisposition to this. And so we were all tested. We all had the blood tests. And I found out, you know, usually you're given maybe one blood test, if you're lucky. But I found out about 3 of them. Now there are 4 of them that I write about in the book. But everybody in my family was negative on the blood test. We were most fortunate to find out about a stool test that is very, very sensitive and seems to pick the antibody up when the blood test fails. So guess what? We were all positive, and we all do the diet. Everybody's life has turned around. So back to gluten. You have damaged villi, and the gold standard for finding out if you have celiac is an endoscopic biopsy, where they go down this way and take snips of your villi. Well, I just went to a conference in Chicago. It was an international conference on this topic. And they reiterated about 3 or 4 times that doctors need to be taking 5 or 6 snips when they do this. And they reiterated it, I am sure, because this has not been happening. And 10 years ago, shortly after we found out about this in the family, there was a consensus conference on this down at the NIH to see what's going on in this country with celiac disease. And since then, not a whole lot has been happening. And this is a driving force for me to get the book out and for people to know about this, because everybody is entitled to know about this. Your doctors should know about this, but they're too busy trying to take care of their patients, and we have a lot of wonderful doctors. But if there's not a mandated course on this, how are they going to learn? They're going to get little bits and pieces here and there, just like you know. So, it can affect your neurons, your cerebrum, your blood, your bones, your skin, your muscles, your tissue, your organs and glands. And I don't know, does that cover? That covers almost everything. If I left something out, it probably covers that too. So, and there is a genetic predisposition. About 1 out of 100 people have celiac disease. Someone just sent me an article, and I haven't had the time to track down the real study, but in the article from Australia, it said that it's about 2 out of 100, not quite 2 out of 100. And I know those numbers are going to go up and up. About 20 years ago, they thought it was about 1 out of 5,000. And now, a few years back, one of the researchers discovered that there's something beyond having the damaged gut. And what I refer to that, and some other people, is non-celiac gluten sensitivity or gluten intolerance. And that just means the gluten is bothering you, but it's not damaging your gut, but it might be damaging your brain or your skin or your neurons or something else. So about the time in between all of my reading, once I started reading about the research, there's a research article here, and over here there's like 6 more that you can go to. And you go to one of those, and there's 6 more. And there was so much research on this, I couldn't understand why doctors didn't have a better handle on this. And at that time, my book club was reading The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. And I thought, you know what? I think I can do something about this. I'm going to write a book. Well, I sort of wished I'd known what I was getting into, because it's been some 10 years, and I really worked at it like a full-time job. Some days more than 8 hours, sometimes on the weekends. And it's been fascinating. I had a fabulous editor and a gal that's been kind of taking me by the hand and leading me along getting self-published. But little by little, I finally got there. The original title was Wheat, the Staff of Life, or Toxic Staple. And one day I was reading about titles and I said, that's way too long. So I cut it down to Toxic Staple. And Toxic Staple, how gluten may be wrecking your health and what you can do about it. And it's really a compendium of about 60 stories, plus my own family story. It has close to 700 citations from research from around the world, and it's made pretty easy to read. I've had a couple people tell me lately that, it's pretty easy reading. So, and if you were to read this book, you'd be able to relate. That was the whole idea of me getting stories, is that somebody could say, wow, that sounds like me. I get headaches and fibromyalgia. Gee, maybe I should get tested, and then flip to the testing chapters, You'll discover the benefits, because most of these stories, except for a couple, their lives totally turned around. It's incredible what taking gluten out. And sometimes dairy is a nasty protein for people too. And that's one thing my body does not like, along with gluten. It gives people hope that have really nasty ailments. Some of these scleroderma, this one gal who had, she lost a child almost at full term, and another pregnancy terminated, and she had cancer twice, and she had about 4 autoimmune diseases. And she just was determined and lives life, but, if she were eating gluten and dairy, she'd probably be dead right now. And even her doctors told her that these things were being caused by the gluten. And I don't think most oncologists really know this. So I've got cutting-edge testing information, and the whole idea is to empower the reader so they can even take information to their doctors. Share the book title with your doctor. Share my I have a toxicstaple.com website, and on it I have a really well done YouTube that I had some guy put together, and it just gives a really good idea of what the book is about. And you need to know that your bodies are meant to be healthy, and they will rejuvenate if they are given a chance. So, all of those people that are being misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed and over with the pharmaceuticals, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Over-medicated, yeah. It doesn't need to be that way, but you need to have the strength within yourself to look at this. And it seems that celiac disease is the only autoimmune disease with a known cause, which is the gluten. And, but it's funny that a lot of other autoimmune diseases seem to get better when you take the gluten out. Even incurable and rare diseases, I encourage, in the back of my book, I tell you how to do some research, and I encourage people to look into the gluten issue. Get tested and see if you're positive. And if you're negative on the blood tests, you need to go to the stool testing, which is the best, I think. At least for my family it was. And it's really a continuum, I think, especially with this new broader view of non-celiac gluten intolerance. So you've got celiac way over here, and boy, you've had it going on for years and maybe decades. Some of my storytellers have a list of 20 or 30 things wrong with them. That just didn't happen overnight. And then sometimes people don't show that they have a positive endoscopy, but they might have positive blood tests. And then there are those that don't have the damaged villi. So maybe they're over here, and if they keep eating this stuff, eventually they may develop full-blown. So, what's the most important thing? You need to become your own advocate. You need to take information to your doctors. You need to be insistent upon getting certain tests. And if they won't do it, pay for it yourself or find a new doctor. I mean, doctors really need to pay more attention to this. And I think they're starting to. And a lot of the groundswell, of course, is coming from the sports enthusiasts, like, who's the tennis player there, Djokovic? I mean, his whole game turned around, and it was just way off. And he found out he was gluten sensitive, and now he's at the top of his game. You need to request testing. If you have family members that are doing this diet, your family members should also be screened because of the genetic predisposition. But you can't just ask for, test me see if I'm gluten sensitive, because you're probably going to get only one test. So you need to request the 4 tests. And then if negative, go on to the stool testing. You've got to do this diet 100%. There is no cheating. It needs to be an absolute lifestyle, and you'll benefit from it. So, let me just, for a second, flip to something here. I've got a few stories. This was a great story about Angie and her 3-year-old non-verbal, violent, non-interactive autistic child who they could not take into public at age 3. And they put this child on dairy-free at first and then gluten-free, and the mother went out of her way to go to farms to get certain foods and vitamins and this and that were going to make this child healthy. He went to school and never needed a one-on-one aid, and that just blows my mind away, because we have so much of this aid business going on in school with these poor kids that can't function. And so he's probably in the 4th or 5th grade now. His life has totally turned around. And Bridget, I met in Denver at a fabulous restaurant. And I walked over to her table when I saw that the waiter brought a gluten-free menu to her. It took me 5 minutes to get my nerve up to do that. But she was very happy to share her story. And she was sick for years. She had a whole bunch of systemic disorders related to thyroid, adrenal fatigue, fibromyalgia, candida, hormonal imbalances, food and environmental sensitivities, and allergies, and sleep disorders, irritable bowel syndrome, emotional and behavioral disorders, depression, and more. This is one person, and I've only listed about half of her symptoms. She's now living in St. Thomas and is very happy and very healthy. And Gail, who has a number of parts in my book, was essentially wheelchair bound. He's a physician's assistant. He was as annoyed as I am, or was. Oh, I'm still a little bit annoyed. He diagnosed himself, and he was walking without a cane after 3 days of being gluten-free. And the experts thought that he had normal pressure hydrocephalus, and they were getting close to installing a shunt in his skull. Fortunately, he didn't need that. And my friend Seth, married to a friend of mine that I went to high school with, he had anemia, major gut problems, chronic joint pain, knee and back, enlarged spleen, elevated platelets, significant memory issues, and he even went to Boston to find out what was wrong. They couldn't find anything wrong with him. Chronic fatigue and weakness and much more. And he spent probably over 30 years and 37 doctors and money out of his own pocket to find out what was wrong with him. And when I heard that he was so sick, I wrote him a letter, and he wound up doing the stool test. He was positive. He was very thankful I got in touch with him. Anyway. So who might benefit from reading this book? Well, a lot of our population are very sick and tired. And if you know people that need a nap at 3 in the afternoon, they probably should be screened for gluten sensitivity. I used to need a nap at 3 in the afternoon. I don't anymore. I can go all day, pretty much, and all night. Now, there are over 300 symptoms and maladies linked to this, so that's quite a few to rattle off. But if you have almost any chronic malady, and I have friends that say, oh, Anne, you think everything is connected to gluten? Well, guess what, folks? There's plenty of research on it. And I have most of it in my book. And of course, a lot of people are just tired of the pharmaceutical drugs and all the side effects from that. It just amazes me how people can take a drug for arthritis that has a ream of, things linked to it that are probably almost as bad, if not worse, than the arthritis. Sometimes people that have pretty good health in their family are also worried, or they may have relatives that have cancer and autoimmune, and they're afraid that they're going to get it. And so the worried well would benefit from reading this book, and it will lead them along to getting tested and trying to figure out if they have the sensitivity in the family. Sometimes, and this is really important, oftentimes when kids are diagnosed, their parents may not be told that other close family members should be screened for this. And if they are screened, they may be negative, and if they're negative, the testing probably hasn't gone far enough. I mean, they might really be negative. But if you're negative on a blood test, you want to go the next path to the stool testing. There's a lot of support from the national and the state and local celiac groups, but and so it's good. It would be good for them to read this book also, because when you're diagnosed with this thing, you can be helpful to other people in your own family or a neighbor or friend. What else? Okay, I'm totally drying up here. And school nurses, not only parents, but teachers and school nurses would benefit from reading this. There's such an increase in allergies and asthma, and it seems to go up almost every year. Now, I used to have bronchial stuff. I had the UTIs going on. Then it turned into the sinus, and then it went into my chest. I would have reactive airway. I sometimes needed the puffers. I had fatigue quite a bit, always yawning in people's faces at 6 in the evening. And the allergies got worse as I aged. And I don't have any of that anymore. It's gone. And that's because my gut has healed. When your gut is so out of whack, and it may be due not only to gluten, it may be due to all the antibiotics you've had, maybe due to a lousy diet, maybe due to some bacterial thing going on in your gut, which is kind of predisposing you to being more sensitive to gluten. You need to pay attention to this. How many of you are not doing this diet that think you might have the problem? Anybody here? Mm-hmm. Well, you can find out easily enough with a little testing. The stool testing is out of pocket, but it's the best money I've ever spent, really. It brought us to health by doing that. So there's a story about my dad, Nick, who used to, oops, I'm getting the sign, 5 minutes, okay. My father, Nick, who used to have a restaurant here in town. I don't know if any of you remember the old Quality, probably not, but anyway, the Quality Lunch on Main Street. He died of liver cancer. And when I was reading the research about autoimmune hepatic liver and sclerosing cholangitis, I got in touch with his doctor to see if my dad might have had that. And he thought that he had the first one, it went into the second one, and then he died of liver cancer. Well, my research tells me that, what's going on with this thing? That those two conditions will reverse if gluten is taken out of your diet. Now, is that headline news? Have you ever read it? In the headlines, I don't think so. And cardiomyopathy, I knew a young man who had that, and he would come and visit, and he was very tired, and eventually he needed a heart. And eventually he died because he didn't get one. And I was shocked when I read that cardiomyopathy can also reverse on a gluten-free diet. Does this tell you how serious this is, and that you really need to look at this? Because if you have this issue going on a little bit for a few years, and then something else happens and it gets worse, and then all of a sudden you can develop cancer, you can develop liver issues, heart issues, thyroid, all the autoimmune stuff is highly linked to this, and it seems to go on and on. So lots of neurological issues are connected. Cancers, women's issues, infertility, miscarriages, sterility, some male issues are linked. Lot of skin issues. My chapter that's a short chapter, but I pretty much mention some skin issues, and they're 8 and 10 syllables, and you never heard of this stuff. You've heard of psoriasis and eczema, but then the rest of it is all these long names, and they get better or disappear. And one of those skin issues is very rare. Well, lo and behold, guess what? If you have the right nutrient added back to your diet and you do a gluten-free diet, it gets better. So, back to my book. Voila, 10 years worth here. My endorsements are wonderful. I put a lot of blood and sweat into this. I have no idea how I sat and did my bibliography, because 700 or so citations is one heck of a lot, and you have to get everything just so. And I think when I got my first endorsement, I just about was in tears, because they were saying doctors and physicians and psychologists should be reading my book. if you go to toxicstaple.com, I have a very cool YouTube. I hope you get to share it with a lot of people that might be having health issues, or their kids might be. I can look at a kid and sometimes know that this kid should be on a gluten-free diet. And it's just rampant. My website also has a table of contents in it you can share with folks, and who should read the book. And I have a foreword by a very forward-thinking doctor who was traditionally medically trained, but she happens to like Dr. Fine's stool testing, and people love her because she gets the answer for them. And she was wonderful. And I think I'm just going to open it up. If anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer them.
I'm just curious, why is it that this gluten-free or celiac disease is so rampant nowadays and the numbers keep increasing? Are you saying that should everybody then be on a gluten-free diet? Is it causing, all this gluten, is it causing all these diseases? So does that mean that everybody should just do away with it altogether, whether they're sick or they're not, so that they don't get sick?
Well, I'm not sure that everybody should be doing the diet. This problem has been around for centuries, and it was described centuries ago. For classic celiac disease is failure to thrive, you lose weight, you have the intestinal issues, and eventually you die. And it's interesting that way back, early caveman didn't consume wheat. He ate what's the big diet that's out there? The paleo diet, yeah. And then as society grew and got bigger, they needed to add something more to their diet because they were running out of berries probably. So they started getting into the grains. The agrarian man is shorter, his brain is smaller, and his bones are more decrepit than what earlier man was when they go to dig up the bones, which is pretty interesting, and it kind of coincides with the introduction of grains into the diet. But today, I think what they're doing to the wheat, apparently, William Davis talks about it in Wheat Belly, that the flour, the cupcakes that your grandmother made way back in the 40s for me, or the 50s, or whenever, that flour was different than it is today, because I don't think they've genetically modified it. I think they've hybridized it, and they've changed it somehow. And they've changed it many, many times to make it so the head is bigger and has more wheat, but then it was falling over, so it has to have a sturdier stalk, so they keep messing around with it. And I think that may have something to do with it. But the other thing is, what they are doing to the corn is not nice. It is criminal what is going on with these big companies. And apparently they are introducing herbicides right into the corn, into the seed. And so that will kill the bugs that might get into the corn. From the inside out, it kills the bugs. But then we eat the corn, and this is just pretty new stuff. And so it's doing a number on our gut also. So that may be another factor that is lending to all of this, the problem with gluten, because our guts are so out of whack and so damaged. Anyway, anything else? Yes, Richard.
Yes, and I have a question about, after listening to you talk, that the partial solution is when you go for your annual physical, that you request to be tested for gluten. It's, as best I know, it's not hot, or you have blood tests, you have all these tests, but there's no test for this. Under the new administration, where so many more people are going to be going for health care, there seems to be a less likely possibility that they're going to want to add any costs to the testing, we're gonna get resistance to this. What do you suggest when we go for a test, when we go for our annual visits?
Oh, boy, that's a good one, Richard. I think,
I would tell them you have I'd say you have stomachache and whatever.
Yeah.
I wouldn't care.
if you have symptoms going on, and the symptoms are many, I mean, there's no end to the symptoms linked to this thing. So if you have anything chronic going on, maybe you can request that your doctor do those 4 blood tests. And the 3rd blood test is not one that's recognized by the NIH. And that's because too many people were actually testing positive to it, which is kind of funny. And then when they went to do the endoscopy, you know, the little snip snip, they found out that these people didn't have damaged villi. Well, maybe they didn't have damaged villi because they didn't have that version of an intolerance to gluten, but they could have had, you know, the extended view, the non-celiac gluten intolerance. So a couple of the research people, one from UMass now and Columbia, I try to check their websites, although every now and then something changes. You know, nobody is on the same page with the testing, especially the support groups. I've even tried to reach out to them and suggest that you guys need to get together on this and have, you know, and when it ever says in a support group that they leave this test up to the discretion of the doctor, I think, oh my God, oh really? Good luck, you know. So that's, I just think people need to know about this, and I was driven to do what I could do, and I've tried to spell it out as best I can. Yeah.
The second part of the question is, the other night we watched on Channel 2 on PBS, they had a special, and this doctor was on. And
Was it Perlmutter?
Yeah.
his whole process went to the most uncurable disease that exists in the country that is getting beyond control, and that's Alzheimer's disease.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a firm believer in his talks, and if you listen to him carefully, that it would make a lot of sense. The monies that go into care for Alzheimer's and destroy families is extraordinary, beyond most people's
Right.
thoughts on the Alzheimer's for a long time. But it makes sense to me from that point of view, that at that level, what's attacking the brain
Right.
could well be gluten. It's, the more you think about it, if no one can find a reason why it happens, it may be because we have no tests that are
Right.
allowed in the process.
Right. I think he's right on with his linking gluten to dementia. And I have one story from a fellow, I have to stop and think for a minute, Dick, and he was an insurance man, and he, not you, Richard, this is another Dick. He was so tired he would have to go to his car at lunchtime and take a nap. And he had 2 or 3 kinds of skin things going on. He had atrial fib going on. And then he also had memory issues. And he got so he couldn't pull the words up, and he was having a real problem. And it was interfering with his work. He found out that he was gluten intolerant. He did the diet, and he takes it very seriously, as most of us do. And 7 months later, everything had gotten better with him. I mean, I just think that is amazing. And it makes me crazy because we have all of these tests, millions of dollars are put into testing and studies, research, but it's all about the drugs. What drug is going to help liver? What drug is going to help your asthma? You know, the ads on TV make it sound like it's no big deal to have asthma. Take gluten out of your diet. I couldn't breathe. I took gluten out of my diet. I didn't get that anymore. Now, maybe that's not going to help everybody, because people that live in the cities, sure, they're dealing with smog and foul air. And I mean, it isn't just the gluten, it's all the other stuff they add to our food, and the lousy air and the lousy water that some people drink. And, but I sometimes wonder if those people from the city that had asthma took gluten out of their diet, I'll bet you they could handle it a lot better. maybe it really isn't the smog. I don't know. Yes, Linda?
Do you know from your research, do people develop an intolerance to gluten? Could somebody be tested at one point and be fine, and then later on develop issues and be tested and they have an issue?
I think so, yes, yeah, because, you know, as a teenager, you might not have any issues, but as you get older, and as I did with all my allergies and everything, you know, it takes a while for the antibodies to get into your blood, which is why I like the stool test, because Dr. Fine claims the antibodies are developed in your gut and will come out in your stool, and they take apparently quite a longer time to get into your blood. So if they've been sitting around in your gut for a long time, maybe eventually they get into your blood. And so if you've got damaged villi, there's another antibody that can show up also, the TTG. And the TTG is like, that's about the only test. Now maybe things are changing a little. Maybe people are getting 2 tests or 3 tests. But for the longest time, the TTG test is the only test, if you asked for this testing, that you would get. And you might be told, you're negative on this. Keep eating the stuff. And meanwhile, you know, if they go to Dr. Fine's test or maybe some other testing out there, they'll find out they have the sensitivity. So, it's pretty fascinating stuff. Yes?
I think in regards to the testing, everybody, you talk about the doctor's not giving the right tests and the money and everything. Really the easiest thing for you to do is to just take it out of your diet. Go a month without it and see if you feel better. I mean, that's free.
That's true. That's very, very true. You know, you have different, traditional medicine says you need to test positive on a blood test. And then if you are, we will do an endoscopy, which is a pretty expensive procedure, I would gather, to see if you have damaged villi. And then there's Dr. Fine. He's kind of in the middle. His testing is more reasonable. You know, he has a malabsorption test for probably $100. And when I saw my numbers on that, I thought, holy Christmas, no wonder I've been tired half my life. And then, you know, there are the naturopaths and the more holistically oriented healthcare practitioners. And they will say, just take it out of your diet for 2 or 3 weeks or a month and see how you feel, and then introduce it back in and see how you feel. And I did that once because when the grandson was diagnosed, I automatically did this diet because I had such empathy. And I thought, well, I'm going to do this to support him. So all of a sudden I started feeling really good 3 or 4 weeks later. And then after my reading, I realized, oh, gee, there's blood, this is genetic, so let's find out who else in the family has this. And so I'd read enough, and I knew that there were at least 3 blood tests. We had those done. They were negative, and losing my train of thought here. Anyway, so yes.
What is gluten? I'm not sure.
Gluten, it's a little protein. Oh, and I didn't tell you what it's in. It's in just about everything. And basically, it's a protein in wheat, rye, and barley. But it's also, they say to stay away from oats, even though oats might not be. They might be okay, except that where they're grown, where they're stored, how they're processed, they all get contaminated with gluten. So I buy oats that come from Montana or Canada where there are no wheat fields, and it's tested, and that's why some of the products are more expensive, because they're tested. But yeah, gluten is a nasty little protein, and it's also in kamut and acorn, and I don't know, there's a few other odd grains. Spelt, I wouldn't touch spelt.
Is it in beer and whiskey?
It's in beer. But they're now making a lot of gluten-free beers, and the products are just exponentially increasing. That, you know, this thing is going nowhere but up. And they do say that the distillation process will take care of any of those little gluten proteins. But some people that are extra sensitive still can't drink certain liquors. And whether it's something else in the liquor, I mean, you know, the researchers say the distillation process keeps the gluten out, but I don't know. Some people can't handle it, so.
Yeah, they have like a potato vodka.
Yeah.
that You can have, it's gluten-free, and, you know, the beers, they got the Red Bridge and a few other beers that are
Right.
gluten-free out there.
It's,
But you gotta watch out with the alcohol to make sure it is
right,
free.
right.
Yeah.
And not everything that's marked gluten-free is, you know? You still have to be careful. And when you're in a restaurant, everybody's jumping on this. And it's scary. It's scary for me when I think about my grandkids eating out and stuff. And, I mean, I ask a lot of questions. And I pretty much go to the restaurants that I know when I'm at home. And, you know, I wouldn't touch a crumb of this stuff. One day we were invited to some friends, and I forgot to ask what they were planning for dinner. Shame on me. And so she started pulling a casserole from the oven, and I thought, oh no, a casserole, it's gonna have mushroom soup in it. Mushroom soup has got gluten in it. Sure enough, I was so embarrassed. And I said, oh, don't worry, I'll just have salad. Give me a double portion of salad. No, I'm gonna run to the freezer and get broccoli and steak. I said, don't do that. Well, he insisted. And so, you know, but that I learned from that. You have to kind of tune in with, you know, if you're invited out, and make sure you bring something that's gluten-free. Yes?
Is gluten in rice?
Well, there is glutinous rice, which is sticky rice, but it's a different kind of sticky and a different kind of gluten. It's not from the grasses, apparently.
How is gluten in mushrooms?
Mushroom soup, I think, would be probably thickened. You know how they thicken it up? Yeah. But I'm sure there's got to be another mushroom soup out there now that's thickened with rice flour or something else, because this thing is so big that everybody's trying to cash in on it. And, you know, Anheuser-Busch was brilliant 5 years ago, and now all the cereal companies and all the big guys out there, it doesn't mean their food is healthy. But it might be gluten-free, but it might not be healthy because it's full of sugar, it's full of white rice, and no nutrients, you know? Yes?
I try to avoid wheat, gluten, so I put rice in my diet a lot. And now you're saying like certain rice has gluten. So what kind of rice has gluten?
No, the rice doesn't have gluten, really. No, there is one rice, and it's called sticky rice, or sweet rice, I think.
It's called sweet rice.
Sweet rice, and that is a glutinous rice, which means that it's sticky, but it doesn't have gluten in it. And gluten is actually the sticky stuff.
Is it sticky rice is like something like Asian rice?
Yeah, yeah.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah, sweet rice. It's Asian.
Or Chinese, something.
That's what I mean.
You have to learn a whole new way of cooking, and you know, the gluten is the sticky part that makes your bread stay together. It makes it crunchy and crusty and chewy. So, you know, you learn different ways of cooking, and there's some pretty good packaged mixes out there. A lot of them have a lot of sugar in them, but I tried doctoring up one of Bob's Red Mill bread, and I added a bunch of flaxseed and a little extra oil. Came out really good. You know, you can mess around with the mixes and just make them a bit more nutritious if you want to. And it's a whole new way of living, but boy, I'll tell you, it beats the alternative. Claire?
Yes, I was just thinking, you just mentioned about flaxseed.
Mm-hmm.
Flaxseed, some of the doctors are saying you should take 2 of those a day, capsules, flaxseed oil.
Mm-hmm.
It helps the plaque in your body
Mm-hmm.
and so forth. But what do you think about that? I mean, well, there's so many oil pills right now, and another is the fish oil, you know, with the fish and everything, if you're not allergic to some of the fishes. But I read a lot of different things about the fish oil and also the flaxseed oil. And I do find on the flaxseed oil, it does make you more alert. It does make you a little more peppier and alert. I've noticed the different feelings in your body, you know what I mean? Not to feel, it takes that slugness, that fatigue away from you, and so forth. And the fish oil now, you know, they say it's very good for the brain.
Right.
For brain and
Right. I can't comment.
And the heart.
Right.
And everything now the flaxseed oil would do the same thing as your regular fish oil, wouldn't it?
I don't, you know what, I can't comment on that. I'm not that into knowing all about.
I'm doing research on it
Yeah.
myself, flaxseed.
Yeah, I think flaxseed is really good for you, and I often throw it into pancakes or cookies or a shake, that type of
I'm
thing.
talking about the flaxseed, it's the same thing anyway, the flaxseed oil pill.
Right.
And I found that is really working with me very good.
It's probably healthy for
Yeah,
you.
one or two a day.
Yeah.
Anyway. I don't overdo it or anything like that, but the
Yeah.
oil going through your system,
Right.
it helps the plaque.
Right. Well, let me just tell you that I bumped into a woman, and I'm so mad at myself that I didn't get her name and contact info, because she told me that she was recently checked. She used to have high cholesterol. Her arteries were plugged, and she was checked. And I don't know how long she was doing the diet, but she said her arteries really cleaned up. Now, was I stupid not to get her contact info? Yes, because her story could be huge. And how many people have heart issues and plugged up arteries and lousy vascular systems? I do read about vascular systems. But no matter what you're taking, if you're malabsorbing, you know, I know someone who once said, well, I don't need to worry about dementia. I take B12. I think her mother had dementia. And I thought, well, good for you. You know, if you're malabsorbing because of a gluten issue, that B12 is not doing you a whole lot of good. So if you got the issue going on, the malabsorption, you can spend $100 a week on vitamins, and it might not be doing you any good.
Well, right now, they're talking about the last few days now, they're talking about a lot of vitamins are not, they're saying it's not really doing what it's supposed to do for that. You've got to eat eat more food now. They're talking about some of the vitamins are not going to be doing you any good.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you heard that report the last couple of days?
I read something or heard something a little while back about vitamins. Some vitamin companies are just not putting the vitamins in that they claim there should be in there. So, you know, you've got to take a really good quality, and you've got to eat healthy, you know, and try to eat organic. I mean, I know it's more expensive, but it's either that or sitting in a doctor's office somewhere and spending your own money for other tests and over-the-counter money for drugs and stuff. And
Eat less and eat healthy.
eat healthy,
Eat
right.
less and eat healthy.
Don't overeat.
Yeah.
And, you know, one thing I didn't mention was that you can have no symptoms, and you can have full-blown celiac disease. So, you know, they found this out because they were doing studies of families, and so-and-so's kid has it, and the two kids had celiac, and so they wanted to study the family. And Uncle Joe was found to have damaged villi, had celiac disease, and looking back, maybe he was a little tired at 3 in the afternoon. Maybe he had a little headache every now and then. Maybe he picked up a cold quicker than some other people in the family. So you can have this thing going on and not really have serious symptoms. And you can have anemia. I mean, you know, and that can be developing, I would think, for quite a while. And, you know, you don't know it until eventually you're deficient, iron deficient, you know? There's a reason you're iron deficient. I mean, there's a...
She was a child with anemia.
Yeah.
The doctors didn't pick it up, putting iron pills and I'm so angry at myself that you know.
How do you know? You don't know.
I know, but they should have picked that up.
Well, they should have, but it's...
Anyway, they actually developed.
You know, I just want to say one thing before you ask your question. A lot of people will say, oh, it runs in my family, osteoporosis or anemia or cancer or autoimmune. Yes, it does run in your family, and guess what? you probably have those genes for celiac also. And if you have those genes, it doesn't mean it's going to materialize. You know, you may never get to that point where you have nasty stuff going on, but it might. So, yes?
When you say you can't do the diet all the way, there's no cheating, whatever, I guess, I don't want to say, what do you mean by that? But I mean, you know how if you find some accidentally, right? Or I was doing a diet for psoriasis one time, and it was like, you know, no bread, no, it sounded almost like the same thing, right? But, you know, it's like, well, yeah, but you can have half a piece of bread on a sandwich, you know, something like that. Is that?
No, you can't. And psoriasis is probably linked to gluten, but it might also be linked to dairy. I think there's one story where the gal, I mean, there's a lot she can't have. And if she has the little spit, and she travels a lot for work, so it's hard for her. But yeah, psoriasis, you might want to really look into this, and you might not test positive for celiac, but you might test positive on a stool test. So, I mean, I always suggest people start with the 4 blood tests because your insurance will probably pay for them. You might have a little trouble getting the 3rd and 4th test. Try to be persistent. But
more along the lines of, gee, try it for 3 months.
I'm sorry?
More along the lines of, try it for 3 months or something.
Try it, yeah. But if you're going to do that, see, I think it takes a long time to get a handle on this diet. I mean, immediately you can cut out the obvious stuff, the bread, the cookies, the cereals that have wheat in them. But it's in everything. They use it in a lot of, it's my bracelets, I think, that are setting that thing off. But it's in so much stuff that it could take you 6 months to get a handle on the diet. So if you only do it for 3 weeks and then quit, you haven't really given yourself enough time to, really get it out and figure it out. And I suggest doing, for $100, you can do Dr. Fine's one test that I talk about. And it's cheap money to get rid of a nasty thing like psoriasis.
Oh, it's $100 a test?
It's about $99.
Oh.
But, and he's got a whole bunch of other tests too, but this one for gluten, and it was really, it's good, the best testing, as I say, that our family did. I'm sorry?
Is that the stool test?
Yeah, yeah, yes,
I have a question about your research.
yeah.
Did you encounter any resistance from doctors or pharmaceutical companies or agricultural companies along your way to try to block you from research?
Well, it's a scary thought, I'll tell you, in today's living, I mean, I can't say what I really want to say. And it wouldn't be nice, and my language would probably be rather bad too, so. But I did have a little resistance. I asked 2 doctors that do research, so they, have the blinders on. And I was really thinking that one of them might come through. And I saw him at a conference, and he gave me a big pat on the back, told me what a good job I did. But these guys are too research-oriented, and the numbers all have to line up, and they're not in favor of Dr. Fine's testing, and Dr. Fine's not peer-reviewed. And it's too bad. And I don't think they're ever going to let him into the big boys club, Mainstream medicine being what it is. But
Are those blood tests, are they kind of drastic? I mean, how do they go by the blood test? I mean, take the blood out of your arm?
They just take it out of your arm, and they probably can do one tube.
I didn't know if it was done by this particular blood test. It was done by a different way.
No, it's a tube, and it's all, on the up and up. It's no, that's the stool. The stool testing is all approved testing. It's not fly-by-night stuff. And the 4 blood tests, they're not on all doctors' radar screen. So you really have to bring a little list with you and say, by the way, I've been reading, and I want to get these tests. And they may give you a hard time on a couple of them. I'm not sure. You know, because they don't want to spend any more money than they have to, and they think that the one blood test, the first one, is enough. But the first one is not enough.
Yeah, because the first one would be complete blood test. I usually get the complete blood test.
Well, that's a different thing. You're getting your yeah,
Vitamin D.
but you're not getting gluten testing on whatever series of.
I'm getting the D.
You're getting the D, and to see if your white cells and your red cells are
Yeah.
doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a lot of cellular red cell stuff, and you know, cells that are too small, too big, pale in color. I mean, there's a lot of bone and blood stuff linked to this. But you have to request, don't just walk in and say, oh, I'd like to be tested for celiac disease, because you will probably get one test. And that's not enough. I'm not a doctor, but according to all that I've read. And even and a lot of my research is from Europe, it's from around the world. And some of the studies are saying that maybe the endoscopy, if you test a certain whatever on the TTG and the EMA, that maybe the endoscopy isn't necessary, but I'll be 6 feet under before they ever come to that conclusion in this country. And I'm going to live a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah? Richard?
My last question. I asked for a complete blood test. My doctor suggested it, and I had it done. It was 3 pages long. There were about 60 things checked. When you get your blood test from a doctor, they give you the cheap deal. I'm just saying that unless you know when you go in and you are asking for something, I don't think in the future you're gonna get this, because
You don't even get
there's
it
too
now.
much time that the doctors and everybody, so you really have to be persistent and research what you want to have them do for you.
Right.
Because they will do as little as possible.
That's right.
Especially in the future.
You're absolutely right. And the gluten testing will not be part of your typical blood test that you go for your annual, and they're going to check all your levels and everything. No, you have to request this, and you need to have a little list. And then before they stick you in the arm, I would also say, by the way, could you just show me what tests I'm getting? I want to compare them with my list here before you get stuck, because, you know, your doctor might only order 2. And, you know, having a panel of tests gives you a broader chance of being discovered, but it still can be negative.
You know, they'll put you through the mail. The best thing to do is spend $100 on yourself. It's well
Really?
worth it. You go out for dinner, 2 people, you spend over $100.
That's true.
It's the best money you can spend.
It really, yeah, it really is.
So I'm gonna go out and just get the the stool. I'm not even gonna
Yeah.
bother with my doctor with all that stuff. For $100, it's.
Well, I didn't really want to go, I mean, I really would like to be able to say, everybody, you know, do Dr. Fine's test, but I didn't feel I could do that. I felt I had to address mainstream medicine. And then some of the research is saying that even if you test a little positive on the TTG and the EMA, the first 2 tests, that it's a sign of things to come. Well, our doctors that are giving the TTG test are pretty much looking at the big numbers. You know, if you test, I don't know if it's over 20, I think it might be over 20, then you need to really look at this diet. If you're 15, they probably say, nah, you're not positive, it's okay. But if you're 15 or 10 or whatever, you probably should pay attention to this and know that that's probably going to keep getting higher and higher, and eventually you know, your health gets really compromised by this thing in so many ways. Yes?
Do you tell in your book the diet that one should aim for? And you mentioned in another question that you might not realize that something had gluten in it. Do you tell what we should be aware of?
There's a ton of help out there, and I wasn't going to put this in the book, but I really just someone suggested, Anne, you really have to put this in, so I did. I added another 2 chapters. And there's a ton of research out there. You can go to celiac.com. You can go to the Celiac Sprue Association. They have, for $35, you know, everything costs money. You can get an updated version every year of thousands of products that are gluten-free. So if you're just starting off, $35, that's really cheap money to get. Not only that, it has 800 numbers. You can call companies. It has all kinds of interesting information linked to gluten in there. And they also give, you know, the grains you can eat, the grains you can't eat. There's so much help out there for people that, you know, it's just it's something you just have to wade through. Take it a little bit at a time and watch your health improve. Yes?
So just kind of to answer your question, we do have gluten-free friends, including Anne. And what I didn't realize was you have to look at your labels on everything.
Yes.
Including salad dressings, soy sauce, something else I forget that I was making for dinner one night and I said, oh, we're having the gluten-free dinner, and there was gluten in it because it's in almost, as Ann said, and everything. So read all your labels.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, you wouldn't think what it's in. I was at the market one day and there was a chef who has a wonderful restaurant and he's pretty up on gluten. And so we were chatting about it and he said, well, I'll bet this doesn't have gluten. And he pulled a can of jalapenos off the counter and looked at it and there was wheat. And I thought, you know, what do they need wheat in jalapenos for? But so you really have to scrutinize everything and you become a label reader and things change too. Sometimes something that had the wheat in it, it's taken out, but then, you know, they might add something back in somewhere along that line. So you just keep at it and your health pays off and you've got all this great energy and you never get sick, so yes.
You have to look out too, because it's also can be found in toothpaste and body products, lip gloss, a lot of, and even things that you put on your skin that can affect people too.
That's right.
Lotions, shampoo, all that stuff. Everything.
Right.
You need any of that.
I've heard that, you know, it's not absorbed through the skin, but I don't know if they're there 100% on that. And if people do have a problem, maybe it's more of an allergic response.
Especially like lipstick and lip gloss.
Oh,
you're
yeah.
ingesting that all the time,
Yeah.
so.
Yes, you have to be very careful if you have a spouse that has just had a nice big piece of pizza and you're kissing, you know, I mean, it's seriously. It's that touchy.
Do you know if any of your grandchildren, I mean, I'm assuming that after one was diagnosed with the celiac disease, then the whole family did the same thing.
Right.
They took gluten out.
Right.
Did the other kids have any resistance, and how do you know how to deal with that, you know, because you're
Well,
going from all the pizzas and the pastas. And,
Right.
know.
You know, we were very lucky because they were young. Nick was 5, and so the kids were 3 and 1, and the other one was probably 3. So they were little, and that's the best time to catch them, you know.
And so when they're
It's
older-
hard when they're older because they come into their own, they think, oh, I don't need this, and
Right.
oh, this isn't bothering me. Well, it may not bother you today, but it may, you know, you keep getting little tiny hits and it keeps affecting the inside. This is apparently what they say, you know, and then all of a sudden you've got some nasty stomach thing or, you know, there's cancers linked to your, all this stuff in your gut and your throat, and it's just something else. Yes?
Is gluten in immunizations, and how do you feel about
Is it what?
Immunizations.
Oh, you know, my feeling on drugs and immunizations is why ever would I take a drug to nullify a poison? I mean, I really look at gluten as toxic. This is not healthy for my family. It might be okay for some people in your family. I don't know. It is not healthy for my family, and we know it. So why would I want to take a drug, especially knowing that most drugs have terrible side effects, you know? And they might come up with some, and they're working on it, believe me, they are working on it. They will have something out there. I don't know when, it might be 2 or 3 years, but they were talking about it at this conference I went to, and they're working on it. And somebody's going to make big bucks when they finally come out with it, because since a lot of our doctors are not up to par on this, a lot of people are remaining sick. And then all of a sudden they'll come out and say, oh, everybody that's sick is probably gluten intolerant. You better take this. Maybe I'm talking out of school. But I wouldn't touch it. Just don't eat gluten.
Dog food now, they got it wheat-free and gluten-free. My mother just got a dog and the trainer said, make sure you get this dog food wheat-free and gluten.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, even dogs that especially have skin problems, and I even wonder about the dogs that have the joint problems, you know, that get older and have that dysplasia, I think it is. I wonder if they never consumed gluten, how their joints would be, because I seriously think that all this hip replacement and knee replacement is linked to this. There's huge osteoporosis, osteopenia, osteomalacia connected to this. So if your bones are brittle, and a huge percentage of people that are diagnosed with celiac have osteoporosis or osteopenia, if your bones are brittle like that, what shape are your tendons in that are holding your hip bones together? I can't imagine that they're in very good shape. And so I happen to think that all this replacement stuff probably wouldn't be around if we didn't consume so much gluten. Oh, my daughter's saying to cut it. So, if you have any more questions on that, we can talk afterwards. So, and thank you so much for coming out.
Thank you.
If anybody's